Welcome to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast, the show that explores the background of Tolkien's amazing world from the very beginning. One of the biggest differences between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, or The Hobbit and The Silmarillion, has to do with the way the elves are portrayed. In The Lord of the Rings and in The Silmarillion, we get these very self-serious elves, and they can be joyful and they can sing songs, and we do see that side of them a bit, especially during holidays and celebrations. But for the most part, we get very self-serious elves in very dire situations. In The Silmarillion, we see a lot about the Noldor and the dark deeds that they do in order to try to retrieve the Silmarils or defend themselves from Morgoth. In The Lord of the Rings, we meet Elrond again, although we already met him in The Hobbit, if you read things in that order. And we have the Council of Elrond, which is the largest chapter in the book, and it is the largest lore dump in the entire trilogy. And it's very self-serious, because these are serious times. At that point in The Lord of the Rings, the wise, who include people like Elrond, have discovered that the thing that they had hoped would never occur had. Sauron's ring had been discovered, and fortunately, by one of them, or at least one of the good guys, a hobbit named Bilbo, who in our story isn't quite at that point yet, but he is on an adventure with Gandalf, a friend of the elves, and they are about to make their way to Rivendell. And if you are reading these in the order of The Lord of the Rings and then going back to the events of The Hobbit, this must be strikingly different for you, especially if you've watched the movies, because the movies, the Hobbit movies specifically, take on that same self-serious tone that the elves had in The Lord of the Rings in order to maintain that consistency. And it makes sense. Jackson did the Lord of the Rings films first and then went back and basically did the events that preluded. Is preluded a word? The prelude to The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. So it would be extremely odd to have watched that first trilogy, The Lord of the Rings, had met Elrond and Galadriel and any of these other elves, and then watched the Hobbit trilogy and found them to be more like they are in the books. Silly, cheerful, full of joy and music and song. And so you might be wondering, why is that? Why is there such a stark difference here when they iron that out for the films? And it goes back to the original reasons why Tolkien was writing this book, as a children's story, but even more importantly, as a fairy tale. And in fairy tales, there's danger as you enter the world of the Fae. And at this moment in the story, Bilbo and the dwarves are getting closer and closer to a land that is foreign, especially to Bilbo. And the creatures and peoples of that land don't behave in ways that you would expect. And that's the point. They come across as foreign and uncomfortable, almost cheerfully uncomfortable, especially with the dire situations that the dwarves and Bilbo and Gandalf have already found themselves in, dealing with the trolls and the wilderness and hunger, and a journey across a landscape that seems barren at this point, only to discover a hidden magical retreat, the last homely home. So let's go there. Let's see what it's all about. Here we go. So we begin chapter 3 a short rest. And like all of the chapters, there's intentionality behind the naming of this chapter. We had an original first chapter where we get this introduction. Then we have a chapter where we have danger. And we realize that the world beyond the Shire is unpredictable and dangerous. So that's already been established. And the dwarves and Bilbo and Gandalf are tired, and they could use some help. So we get chapter 3, A Short Rest. In the very beginning of this chapter, Tolkien notes the mood that the dwarves and Bilbo and Gandalf are in. It says, "They did not sing or tell stories that day, even though the weather improved, nor the next day, nor the day after. They had begun to feel that danger was not far away on either side." And so we get this glimpse of them at the beginning. And this is one of the first times, I believe it did happen a little bit in chapter 2, where we get the passing of days. We come to find out that this story will not be detailing every single day of the adventure. It is a long trip. It takes days and days and days to journey from one location to another, much like anybody would take in a world without vehicles to drive you around, or a train or a plane. You have to hoof it, and it takes a while. But the most important thing about this very first sentence is the fact that they do not sing. That was the first 4 words. They did not sing. And it's going to stand in stark contrast with where they're about to end up. We learn more about what kind of stress they're under. They're camping under the stars. The horses had more to eat than they did, because the horses, of course, could eat grasses and things around them that the Hobbit and the dwarves and a wizard didn't eat. And then we get descriptions of what their journey is like, and more specifically, what the landscape is like around them. And this is something I did not appreciate enough in my teenage years when I was reading through this initially. I felt like a lot of these details were unnecessary. But as I get older, as I reread these stories, I find them to be very important. They put context into the story. They give us a sense of place. We learn that they forded a river, and then we get this description about the noise of stones and foam. These are those little details that all of us can picture in our minds, unless we have aphantasia, which I believe is the word for when you can't picture a noise or a sound or an image in your head. But for those of us who have that ability, I get pictures in my head where I can see a babbling brook with foaming water and the peacefulness of that. And next we have a description about the mountains. And I love this description. The great mountains had marched down very near to them. Notice that Tolkien is giving the mountains a verb. The mountains are active. They marched down near to them, and they seem dark and drear. Not dreary, drear, which is another one of those words that we don't really use very often. We always say dreary. It's a dreary day out, but we don't say the night looked drear. And then we get this conversation between Bilbo and the dwarves. And Bilbo is showing us here, or at least Tolkien is showing us through Bilbo here, that he is still naive about certain things. He asks, is that the mountain? He knows they're going to a mountain. And of course, it isn't. He's never seen mountains this big. Balin explains to him, of course not. And notice it's Balin, the most friendly of this group, who's there to kind of guide Bilbo. He says, this is only the beginning of the Misty Mountains, and we have got to get through or over or under those somehow. Notice that he says under. That is not the ideal path. That is not the planned route. But we are getting foreshadowing here. If they can't go over or through, they're going to have to go under. And then he continues, before we can come out into Wilderland beyond. Notice that it's named Wilderland. This is the wild. This mountain acts in a way like a boundary that slowly ramps up to a wild, almost magical foreign place. He continues, and it is a deal of a way even from the other side of them to the lonely mountain in the east, where Smaug lies on our treasure. We know now that this is a journey into the Fae. The world that they have left is the world of common people, people who tend gardens, work on farms, craft things. The world of dwarves and hobbits. And there's this boundary right here in front of them that denotes that they are about to enter some place that is very different. The first hint was the trolls coming down from the mountains. Now we are at the mountains. And Bilbo exclaims, "Oh!" And just at that moment, the narrator tells us that he has felt more tired in this moment than he had ever remembered feeling before. That feeling, that Baggins feeling, starts beckoning him to return home. Because he thought he was almost at the mountain, the lonely mountain, but he was nowhere close. Then Gandalf pipes in, and we learn some things from him as well. He's worried about missing the road. He's specifically looking for a path, and he reminds us, the reader, that they need food and rest in reasonable safety. Camping out under the stars every night is not either comfortable or safe. They need a place where they can rest, regain their strength, and continue on. And then in this paragraph, he says, if they don't find the proper path, they'll have to go back to the beginning again. And then, quote, if you ever get back at all. The stakes are continually being raised here. And then Gandalf tells us very specifically, you are come to the very edge of the wild with a capital W. He confirms without any shadow of a doubt that we are the edge of the land of the Fae. And then we learn that the last homely home is here. Elrond lives there. And he sent message through his friends, the elves that he had met when he was away when they first engaged with the trolls. So this doesn't just inform us about where they're about to go. It informs us about the kind of person that Gandalf is. He's a friend of the elves. He is a friend of creatures that are strange and foreign. So they continue on, and we get this description about this land with no valleys and no hills and no trees. And this is something they did well in the film. The landscape that they are running through at this point in the film, trying to avoid Azog and the orc riders, it doesn't happen in the books. But we do have a situation where they are continuing through this, quote, wide land, the color of heather and crumbling rock, which just feels barren and huge and seems to go on forever without any visual landmarks. Nothing other than the looming mountains that seem to keep getting closer and closer and closer. So we're given this dilemma. Well, where is this house? There's nothing out here. It's basically barren, flat wilderness. And so the day passes, and we are told that the house might be hidden anywhere between them and the mountains. And then this happens. They came on an unexpected valleys, narrow with steep sides that opened suddenly at their feet, and they looked down surprised to see trees below them and running water at the bottom. There were gullies that they could almost leap over, but very deep with waterfalls in them. There were dark ravines that one could neither jump over nor climb into. There were bogs, some of them green, pleasant places to look at with flowers growing bright and tall. But a pony that walked there with a pack on its back would never have come out again. We are getting the first hint at what elves are actually like. They're surprising. This landscape that they find down in a narrow, unexpected hole, basically, is unexpected. It's full of waterfalls and plant growth and flowers, beautiful things. And that's the second piece of the thing about elves that makes them elves, is that they're beautiful. They're meticulous. They're fair. And yet the third thing here is noted, that things are very deep. The gullies are deep. There are waterfalls and dark ravines. places that look like maybe you can jump over, but you couldn't, and places where ponies would fall down and never get back out. Elves are also dangerous. They're unexpected, they're beautiful, and they are dangerous, all at the same time. Tolkien is describing the Fae. This is a portal into a different world. The very next sentence says, "It was indeed a much wider land from the ford to the mountains than ever you would have guessed." It's like it's an illusion. And yet, there was a path to follow. White stones, and Gandalf seemed to know his way, but he kept looking back and forth, making sure to follow the white stones along the path. And it's the sort of thing that unless you knew that that was something to look for, something to guide you down here safely, you wouldn't know to look for the white stones. It wasn't like it was a walkway that was completely, edged on both sides by white stones like a path. It was more like these were little markers just placed here and there at a distance from each other to make sure that you knew you were still headed in the right direction. And I love the description that his head and beard wagged this way and that as he looked for the stones. And it shows that even though Gandalf is familiar, he's not always 100% knowledgeable. He still has to figure things out. And it also implies that maybe things change over time. Maybe this path isn't always the same. So the party continues along this path, with descriptions of moths fluttering about, and the light becoming very dim, for the moon had not risen. This is a dark night, again, lending to this idea that it's beautiful, but also dangerous. A night in the wilderness without the light of the moon is very dark. If you've been far enough away from cities to experience this, it is something absolutely worth noting here. And yet, eventually they make their way, and we're told that they came to the edge of a steep fall in the ground so suddenly that Gandalf's horse nearly slipped down the slope. This is a land that is mysterious and beautiful, but even dangerous enough that it almost took Gandalf's horse. And we're about to meet some new friends, some elves. But first we have to go thank our patrons, so don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. It's time for that spring reset. I'm taking a look at everything in my closet and figuring out that, oh no, this absolutely needs to go. And it's about time I replace things so that my clothes aren't older than my 15-year-old. Now you might think that they lasted that long because they were well made, but no, they're in terrible condition. Unlike the new jeans I just got from Quince. Jeans have always been my personal go-to because you can kind of wear them for lots of different things, but maybe they're not your thing. Maybe you're looking for, 100% European linen with insanely soft flow knit activewear fabric. It's definitely getting warmer, and their flow knit activewear is moisture wicking, anti-odor, and soft enough that you'll actually want to wear it every day. So pick out what you want. You can't go wrong because they have prices 50 to 60% less than similar brands. And like I said before, they are high quality. I continue to wear their clothes all the time, and I know that these new jeans are going to last me a lot better than the other things in my wardrobe. And on top of it, they look great. They're so comfortable, and I spent just as much on the jeans that I am now cleaning out of my wardrobe. So if you're looking for something better, just all around better, go check out Quince. So go do it right now. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. Go to quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/ringslore. All right, here we are. It's the middle of the show. Thank you all for your support. And also thank you for your patience in letting me take the last week off. Things have been kind of busy. My whole schedule has changed. It's funny how when little things change, it kind of, dominoes into other stuff. And then eventually you find yourself absolutely worn out by all the changes. So I won't go into details, but But I was definitely in need of some time off last week, so I appreciate your patience. But I'm excited to be back, and I hope you are enjoying this episode. I'm pretty sure this episode is a lot better than it would have been if I just kind of forced it out last week. So hope you're enjoying that. And thank you to everyone who supports the show, especially those of you on Patreon, including our newest patrons, David W. and Greg at Mordor's Carpentry, which I don't know if that's a real place, but that's a really cool name. I hope that's a real place. Thank you for your support. Welcome to the Patreon. And let's shout out all of our VIP patrons. AK Music Lover, Apollo, Aragorn III, all at Lay Morton. I always mess that up. Austin C, Azel Razzle, Barney D, Bo, Brandy D, Cutter Metalworks, Daniel Nightweaver, David S, David M, Divine Madman, Fulcrum, Gimli a Break, Greg at Mordor's Carpentry. Now I get to say that every week. That's fun. Gemma D, Jezer, Josh W, KTS, Capenna, Lori B, Mason Weathertop, Nick K, Nostrils of Sauron, Richard J, Rivqua, Rosie Rose, Sam B, TJT, and Tour Son of Hoor. Thank you so much for all of your support. And thank you for those of you who take the time to leave a 5-star review, which you can do on Apple Podcasts, and I will read it out on a future episode of the show. You can rate the show on Spotify if you listen there. You can join us on the Patreon and leave comments and things. There's all sorts of fun stuff going on over there. You can even join up as a free member. You don't get the same benefits as the paying members, but you can be part of that community. And when something goes up that is kind of a notification for everyone, you can stay plugged in. There's lots of ways to be involved. You can join us on the Discord. You can share the show with your friends. And I hope, fingers crossed, that season 2 of Rings of Power is awesome. And I would love to hear some of your takes on it as we go through those episodes. I will be doing bonus episodes every week that discuss the episode of the week, because it's going to be like weekly episodes. And that's going to be great because we'll get to go over a lot of the details and stuff. So all of that's going to be on the Patreon. Thank you so much for your support. Let's move on with the rest of the story. Here we go. So as they make their way down into this, I don't even know what to call it, this beautiful landscape, this dangerous, rocky, yet plant-filled foreign place, this valley far below, as it says here. They saw a valley far below, and they could hear the voice of hurrying water in a rocky bed at the bottom. The scent of trees was in the air, and there was a light on the valley side across the water. They're getting closer and closer to what appears to be the kind of place where people would live. And we learn that this is quite the experience for Bilbo. He's never going to forget his making his way down here, slipping and sliding and all of that. And it is specifically noted here that this is the secret valley of Rivendell. The air gets warmer as they get lower. And I love this detail too. The smell of the pine trees made him drowsy, so that every now and again he nodded and nearly fell off, or bumped his nose on the pony's neck. Is that because he's exhausted from his trip, or is this some sort of magic? It's not uncommon when you encounter the world of the Fae that your perceptions are changed, or you fall asleep. Think about Alice in Wonderland. She falls asleep and then wakes up. All of that to make you wonder, is this a dream? Or is that a spell of protection? Is that some sort of magic on this place? And then the landscape continues to change. And Tolkien knows his trees. He notes here that the trees changed from beech to oak. And this is one of those details that I feel like gets lost on so much of us as a modern audience. I don't know my trees. How many of us know the distinct differences between these different types of trees and where they live and where you can find them and even what they look like? I generally know what a beech and what an oak looks like, but I don't know a whole lot more about them. And yet he notes it here, and he continues to note these little details. And then Bilbo thinks, it smells like elves. Which is a funny statement. This is another one of those, hey, this is something funny to say for the kids as you read through the story. But it also shows that Bilbo has encountered elves before, and that they have a distinct smell, that they smell different from other people because they are different. And then all of a sudden, we get a poem. There's a burst of laughter in the trees And let's go through it because it's interesting. Oh, what are you doing? And where are you going? Your ponies need shoeing. The river is flowing. Oh, tra-la-la-lolly, here down in the valley. Now, let's stop here for a moment. They have questions, they're curious, but they are revealing themselves. They expected these dwarves and this hobbit and wizard to come through. And they're doing this thing where they kind of note the obvious. Your ponies need shoeing. They've been on the road for a while. The river is flowing. They mention the things of nature. This is something very common you'll find in the poetry and the songs of the elves. They are a part of nature, and yet the part of nature that is foreign and strange in a way. Oh, what are you seeking and where are you making? The faggots are reeking and bannocks are baking. Oh, trilililolly, the valley is jolly, ha ha. Now, you'll probably notice some words here. Faggots in this is not the way that people use it as a mean, terrible thing to say to people. It is specifically bundles of sticks. That's what that means. So that's an antiquated term. You don't generally hear people use that very much unless you're like me at 16 years old making fun of people for calling people bundles of sticks in high school. But then you also have this other antiquated word, bannocks, or at least it is to me. I don't know if you live in a place where that word is still common. It's basically baked bread. But that makes me wonder, is this kind of a nod at Lembas, which is mentioned in the Silmarillion and would have already existed at the time of this writing, I would assume. So maybe this is just a word that we would find more common than something like Lembas, which they're not taking the time to explain yet here. And then we get the, oh, trilililolly, the valley is jolly, haha. And we have this little laugh at the end. But we also know that this is a song because of the, whatever the word is for saying, is it alliteration, for saying words that just kind of sound like sounds. Then the next section goes, oh, where are you going with beards all a-wagging? No knowing what brings Mr. Baggins and Ballin and Dwallin down into the valley in June, haha. This is very interesting. It's all so very interesting. The beards are wagging. They're making fun of the dwarves, as elves do, because they have these big long beards. And they name these people out. Now, I'm not sure that Gandalf would have given them all of their names when he met with them earlier, but somehow they know that this is a Mr. Baggins, and Ballin and Dwallin are here, who may have been well known among communities of dwarves, and maybe even dwarves that have interacted with elves before, so maybe there's a chance there. And then we get specifically the month. It's June. It's summer. Oh, will you be staying, or will you be flying? Your ponies are straying, the daylight is dying. To fly would be folly, to stay would be jolly, and listen and hark till the end of the dark to our tune, haha. It ends so well. Basically, they pose the question, are you staying or are you flying? Are you going to continue on? Well, it wouldn't be a good idea to continue on because it's getting dark out, so you might as well stay and have fun with us. They're being friendly, strange, but friendly in their own way. And they laugh and they sing in the trees. And we're told that it is pretty fair nonsense, I dare say. You think it? The narrator is talking again to the reader, basically saying, hey, this part's pretty silly, right? It's supposed to be silly. But yet, there's more to it. He then tells us that they were elves, of course, as in, this is common. This is what you're supposed to expect when you meet an elf. And then we learn a little bit more about both Bilbo and the dwarves. Bilbo, we learn that he loved elves, though he seldom met them, and he was a little frightened of them too. Again, we're threading that needle or walking that line, the tightrope. I guess I could come up with a dozen analogies here, but the idea is that we're supposed to not be sure. We're supposed to see these as silly and fun. This is a beautiful place, but it's also dangerous. These elves seem friendly, but are also a little disconcerting. How do they know the names? Why are they singing this song the way they are? Have you ever been in a situation where somebody seemed too happy for the situation and the rest of what was going on in the environment around you and everyone else? They come across a little bit off their rocker. And that is disconcerting. There's something here that's supposed to be strange. It's supposed to feel uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable in a creepy, dark sort of way. Uncomfortable in a light sort of way. Then we learn a little bit more about the dwarves. Dwarves don't get on well with them, meaning the elves. Even decent enough dwarves like Thorin and his friends think them foolish, which is a very foolish thing to think. Or get annoyed with them, for some elves tease them and laugh them, and most of all, at their beards. So it kind of wraps up this section with this idea of, okay, well, yeah, they get teased and things like that. But particularly what's interesting here is that people think them foolish, which is a very foolish thing to think. And it would be going too far to say that these elves were putting on a fake show, a sort of disguise, in order to show themselves as being more jolly and happy and welcoming than they actually are. I don't think that's the point here. The point isn't that they are being fake. The point is that elves are dynamic individuals. They can find joy in the sunsetting of the day and the journey of dwarves into their land, and the running of waterfalls and the singing of birds. They are so connected to nature that they can find the beauty of it worth a song in a moment's notice. And yet, you shouldn't be confused by that joy and that love of nature and think it foolish. Because elves have a lot more going on. And there is a depth of seriousness, concern, pride, or heroism that on first look, you might underestimate them about. So next week, we'll continue into Rivendell and we'll get an even closer look at what's actually going on here. Thank you again for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful week. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast. If you'd like to learn more about other fantasy worlds, check out my other podcasts, the Elder Scrolls Lorecast, the Witcher Lorecast, and more at robotsradio.net. If you'd like to reach out, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a note on Twitter at robots_radio, or join our amazing community on the Robots Radio Discord. There are links in the show notes, or just search Robots Radio Discord, or find the link on robotsradio.net. I'll see you next time.